You're checking out the Investor Shed podcast with Nick Beveridge and Jeremy Kitchen. They're on the path to financial freedom and they're taking their community with them. Stay tuned for the best free real estate investing advice on the internet.
How's it going, everybody? Hey, this is Nick Beveridge at the Investor Shed podcast here with my co-host, Jeremy Kitchen. How you doing today?
Nick, I'm doing very, very good. How are you doing?
Super good. Super good. It is Monday morning. I had a fantastic weekend of eating junk food, nachos, had some beer, and then had to show up at the gym with my personal trainer at 5:45, and I regretted everything I did over the weekend.
All that prime rib you had when you came over really got to you, huh?
Well, I think the prime rib was probably the healthiest thing I had all weekend.
Nice, nice.
How was your weekend?
It was good, man. We had you guys over for Friendsgiving, had a lot of fun, played some Jackbox on the Xbox. That was a good time. Also, good news, we've got a deal closing this week, don't we?
We do. We have some big monies to make.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I haven't had a big closing in, gosh, it's been maybe 3-4 weeks for a nice large paycheck. So this will be nice. I can't wait to spend it immediately. What are you going to do with your money?
I'm going to pay off part of my HELOC with it. So everything I took out of the HELOC to invest in the deal with you guys, I'm going to pay that off. I'm going to pay a little bit more towards the principal and then pay all the bills I've accumulated since starting this deal. So get it back down to ground zero and then throw it back out there and reinvest some more. So it'll be good.
I'll take it if you're reinvesting.
We'll talk after the show. We'll see what we got. So, but today we got a cool episode. Today we just we interviewed Josh Cote. He's a part of the North Idaho REI team, doing a lot of cool things. He talks about his mindset and discipline, his time in the military, and how he's continuing to evolve and trying to be the best version of himself. Really cool guy doing a lot of really cool things. So, anything you want to add to that, Nick?
Man, it's just been really cool seeing him go from when we met him, not really knowing much about real estate at all. Went through all these mentorship programs, obviously, but we mentored him as well. He's got a really in-depth knowledge now of how to put a deal together, which is, I think, pretty fantastic. That's what a lot of people struggle with, I believe. And he's just going for it, and he can just he's a bird with wings now.
I love it. He's a very creative dude too, right? Like you were saying. So he's really good at coming and creating deals without having to come with money out of pocket. And we'll talk about that in the episode and how he does that. So without further ado, though, let's bring him in.
Here we go. All right, Josh Cote, welcome to the Investor Shed podcast. How you feeling today?
Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, Josh, absolutely. Very good to have you here. So, obviously, Josh Cote works on the North Idaho REI team, does a lot of cool stuff. Why don't you tell us about yourself, though? Tell us about your background and how you got started in real estate investing.
Yeah. So I started probably mid-2020. We're kind of in the height of COVID, and I was really trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I was working a corporate job at the time in insurance. Working for Liberty Mutual, and it just really wasn't fulfilling at all. To be honest, every day I showed up to work, I wanted to jump out of a window. So it was rough, and I'd show up to work and just kind of be like, man, this can't be the rest of my life. Like, I made okay money. I made over $50,000 a year at the time. And I also made some money from my background in the military every month. So, things were stable. The bills were paid. We'd get our 1.2 vacations a year or whatever. But it's just like, man, this can't be the rest of my life. Just show up, clock in, and sit here at this desk forever. So I was really trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was always really interested in real estate. So back in 2010, I deployed to Iraq. I was in Baghdad for a year, and real estate was one of the things that me and my buddies talked about all the time. It's like, what are we going to do when we get out of here? What's the future look like? Because at the time I was 20 years old. I turned 21 in Iraq, and we were all trying to figure it out. So just through those conversations, kind of realized that one day I wanted to own real estate. I didn't really know what that looked like. And then, of course, like pretty much everybody read Rich Dad Poor Dad around that time. But quickly afterwards, ended up meeting my wife. We started having kids, and I needed a job, so I needed to make money. So I, kind of went and did the corporate job thing, and didn't really think about it until COVID happened, and people were losing jobs. I did end up losing my job during COVID. Luckily, I had already kind of started in the real estate space with wholesaling. And so from there, I just said, you know what, I have to make this happen. If I'm going to do it, I got to do it now. So, backs to the wall, and I'm going to make it work.
All right. So you said you already were thinking about real estate back then, back when you're in your young 20s in the military, and you said a lot of your friends were talking about real estate as well. Do you remember what it was that actually first got you interested in real estate? And do you remember, was it a book you read randomly? Was it something somebody said? Did you have a friend or family member that was successful in real estate? What got you thinking about real estate way back then?
Yeah, none of my friends had any family members in real estate. I didn't have any family members in real estate. So I really didn't know much about it. But it was just through the conversations with one of my best friends. So his name's Kevin. He was the best man in my wedding. We essentially lived together for that entire year in Iraq. Shared a space, and then he was my truck commander during that deployment. So, lots of time to have conversations and, get pretty deep with somebody in that situation. But just through talking to him, I don't know if it was something that he looked into or had read, but he talked about, owning rental properties. And that was really the only thing I knew about real estate was, you could own rental properties and you can make some passive income off of those. And that was kind of the appeal to me. I was like, it'd be pretty nice not to, have to work hard the rest of my life in a sense. I had no idea what I was talking about back then because real estate's still pretty hard work. But, my background then was military, and then I, got into a lot of physical labor type jobs before the insurance stuff. So I always knew man, I don't want to keep doing this to my body. I don't want to do this to myself the rest of my life, picking up heavy things and, running myself into the ground. So that was always the appeal, was the passive income. But I knew nothing about, real estate. I didn't even consider being a real estate agent at the time. I was just like, I should own some property and, I'll be good.
That checks out for sure. So speaking of the military, Josh, how long have you actually been active military? I know you've been in the military for quite a while.
Yeah. So I joined the military right after high school. So I graduated high school in 2008, and I had no plans of joining the military at the time. I actually wanted to go to college and go to school for video game design, right? I grew up drawing, and that's all I wanted to do was draw and play video games, right? So my parents looked at the tuition for that. I think I was trying to go to some art school, and they were like, yeah, hell no, we can't pay for this. So you're going to have to figure out how to do that on your own. And the military was kind of one option I had considered, but didn't put much thought into until graduation. I got a call from a recruiter, started talking to them. And the college thing was appealing at first too. But I was also pretty patriotic at the time. I wanted to serve my country. So joined the Army right after high school, did a couple years, through training of the active duty stuff. And then I came back and went to the National Guard here in Idaho. And I did that up until June of this year. So 14 years total. I think technically I'm still in, but because of the COVID stuff, I'm not in, if that makes sense. 14 years.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your service. Definitely. We appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
What was it like going from the military to a corporate insurance job to now kind of more of a self-employed real estate job? What was it like just going through that journey of being told exactly what to do every day, from the moment you wake up to when to brush your teeth to all of a sudden, I think you were working remotely, right? As an insurance guy?
Yeah, so it's been a learning experience through each phase of my life, and just like the nature of each job too. So I did the military thing, obviously very physical. When I was home, like I said, I was in the National Guard, so working mostly, you're home pretty much all year round. You just go do training on like the weekends every month, and then an annual training a couple times a year, unless you deploy, right? So while I was home, I was working very physical jobs. Eventually became a wildland firefighter. Did that for a few years. So just kind of like backbreaking stuff, right? And it was never. I don't know. It was just kind of like the way life was, right? I didn't really think about like, oh, I could have a nice kind of desk job. And then, let's see, I was in college. I was using my GI Bill to get through school, because I never went to college like I was supposed to, right? Um, After deployment, I ended up meeting my wife. We started having kids. So about the time I was 24, I think I was like, well, I should probably go to college, get a grown up job, whatever. So I was living off of my college money and my GI Bill, and then during the fire season, I was fighting fire, and that was coming to an end. I think I graduated in 2017. Um, and had to start looking for a job. And I was kind of in between fire seasons, so it was winter, and I was like, all right, well, I need something now. So I just happened to have a friend who worked at the insurance company at Liberty Mutual who basically gave me a reference. I applied, I got the job, and then it's kind of weird going from being so active to just sitting at a desk. They trained you, they put you through a bunch of courses. You had to get licensed in a bunch of states to do insurance and all that stuff. So that in itself was different. But going from a W-2 to a W-2 really wasn't much different, right? You still had to show up at a certain time every day, and had to clock in and had a supervisor above you. So going from that into real estate and essentially being self-employed was a pretty big shift at the beginning. And not just because, I don't know, it's not like with the military, it's very structured, and same with the W-2 job, it's very structured. Like there's certain tasks and things that you have to do every day. With self-employment, nobody's telling you what to do. Like I was very motivated to show up and make it happen because I had to, but at the same time, it's like, what task do I do now? You know what I mean? It's like sometimes you get a little lost, and it's like I don't know what to do next. So I think that was kind of the biggest structure or struggle, was like the change in structure, but not necessarily like somebody else holding you accountable. It's just more of like, what do I do? And figuring that out kind of took some time. It was like, I don't know. For a while, you just don't really know what to do until you figure it out.
I mean, as for me, I've been self-employed for just a few months now. I'm running into the same issue, right? Like I'm like, okay, what's the most important next task I should be doing that's going to push the needle forward? Because I can fill my day with a whole bunch of little itty bitty stuff. I'm like, oh, this is productive. I'll fill out my business cards. I'll make sure they're all in the Rolodex, whatever. I'll put them in the CRM. I'll work on my logo. Like that's not pushing the needle forward. It's just kind of stagnant work to kind of keep you busy.
And that's kind of the biggest thing too. Like like you're saying, like the busy work, right? When you're working a W-2 job, most of it's busy work. They're just trying to find something for you to do most of the time. And so when, like you said, when you start on the self-employed kind of path, working your way up to hopefully being a business owner at some point, right? You think you're productive when you're not. You're just doing a bunch of busy work, and you're like, oh, I'm doing so many things. Like I'm answering emails and I'm, doing all this stuff, when you're just really not. So that's been one of the biggest shifts for me recently too. Is just like figuring out, okay, what are the activities that move the needle, and how can I focus mostly on those? Because things come up too, right? Like there's plenty of things that have to get done that you still have to, unfortunately, do as busy work. But
Absolutely.
And I can totally relate. I've been self-employed for over a decade now, and I understand the first couple of years, it's so confusing. You don't know if what you're doing is working. And I know, Josh, you're now 2 years or so self-employed at this point?
Yeah. 2 years almost exactly next month.
And from what I've seen you do, you've done a lot. Not to steal your thunder or anything, but like when I met you, you were wholesaling with another local investor, and then you were also trying to flip houses at the same time. Then you got your real estate license when you joined our team. So you're selling real estate, you're wholesaling, you're flipping houses, and then you were even doing out-of-state work. You're going into all these different markets with different partnerships, a part of your mentorship program. None of this is a bad thing at all, but it just seemed like you were extending yourself quite a bit, and maybe you didn't know, for the first year or so what you were doing, if it was effective or not, because you typically, as a self-employed person, you don't get paid for the things that you do until months later. So it's hard to tell if what you're doing is working or not. So I can completely relate to both of you. Jeremy, you're just self-employed now a few months. Josh, has been a couple of years, and I've been, it's been over a decade now, and I totally understand the struggles you're going through, and I appreciate everything that you're doing, and that you're just you're continuing to show up every day, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, thank you. And on top of that, I also have shiny object syndrome, like really bad. So I do something for a little while and it works, and I'm like, this is awesome. And then I see the next thing and I'm like, I want to keep doing that. And I kind of convince myself, I'm like, well, it's all real estate, like, which is true. It's been good because it's been a learning experience. Like, I've done a lot, and I've done a lot more than a lot of people do, like, right away. So I've learned a lot of different things. I'm still like nowhere near the level that I want to be, obviously. And I don't know, just learning so many different things has been a blessing and a curse. Because, like you said, you see the next thing and you're like, oh crap, I want to do that now. So I don't know, it is what it is, but it's been good at the same time.
The hardest problem with real estate investing is there's too many ways to make money, and I've heard that before. Going back a little bit on your military a little bit, Josh. So obviously, like Nick said, you're doing a lot of great things right now. You're showing up really well in a lot of areas. Part of that's kind of attributed to your discipline and mindset, right? Is that from the military? Is that where you learned to be disciplined?
I'd say partially, right? Like, I think joining the military at a young age was a huge blessing for me, kind of like blessing in disguise, right? Because as a kid, I didn't really have much direction. I didn't really know what I wanted to do other than the video game and art thing. So that was a huge blessing in disguise because it kind of forced me to grow up in a lot of ways that I probably wouldn't have had I not joined the military. The discipline that you learn like at basic training is more of a forced discipline. It's kind of strange. Like, you have obviously a drill instructor there, a drill sergeant there, like screaming in your face and like making you do certain things. So you kind of get to the point you're like, well, I don't want to deal with this. So you have the discipline, right? And then that's kind of one aspect of it. And then you move on and you go to your unit, and it changes, right? You still have like a sergeant above you or leadership above you that's holding you accountable. But it's not like screaming at you and like, you have to do this now, you have to do that, right? You still will get punished essentially if you don't do something correctly, or if you disobey or whatever, right? Like, they'll smoke you, they'll make you do a crap load of push-ups or whatever. But the discipline aspect changes a lot when you get to a unit, because then, especially if you're training for a deployment, the discipline comes into account. It's like, all right, we're about to go to war, right? You're going to be deployed overseas. And at the time, we were still kind of in active combat overseas. The landscape's changed a lot since then, but back then it's like, you're going to war, and if you don't do these things, like, there's a good chance you're going to get killed or you're going to get somebody else killed. So then the discipline shifts from like somebody screaming at you and forcing you to do something to like, I care about my buddies and I care about my own life. So, I want to be at my best so that I don't affect other people and that I can execute and do the mission to the best of my ability. Um, to where now it's like outside of the military on the self-employment side, it's more of like a self-accountability type discipline where it's like, okay, it's still, I want to be my best. I want to do my best, but there's no life-threatening aspect. It's a lot different. Like you have to wake up every day and kind of motivate yourself to like get to that next level. And a question that I ask myself constantly is like, is this getting me to the next level? Like, I'm a human being. I still screw up all the time. And so like, typically I wake up at 4 a.m. I wake up really early to get my day started. So that way I can get to the gym. I can do all my tasks. I can do some work before work in a way. And there's times when I'm tempted to sleep in and when I give into that and I do sleep in and I'm not necessarily very disciplined that day. But oftentimes I'll roll out of bed and I'll kind of ask myself, like when I get that thought of should I hit the snooze button again, it's asking myself that question, is this leading to a future you that you want, right? Like, is this the person that you want to be? And typically the answer is like, no. So get your ass out of bed. But sometimes it's like, you know what? I'm tired and I want to sleep a little bit more. So it's a balance and a different type of discipline than the military, but still useful.
It's like an evolved discipline, basically.
Yeah, it's a long way of saying yes. I think the military discipline helped, but it's so different that I don't think, I think anybody can learn how to develop discipline without necessarily having to have an experience like joining the military. But it's definitely helpful.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you face today still when it comes to discipline?
I mean, like I said, man, I'm still human. I face the same struggles that anybody else faces, right? Like I have goals and I have certain things that I want to do. So knowing that I need to move the needle forward every day is kind of the biggest part for me of discipline, right? Like I have to do the tasks. And if I'm not doing the tasks, then essentially I'm losing and I'm going backwards. But there's always temptation. There's always struggle. It's not always easy to stay disciplined. So, there's times when I want to sleep in, like I said, and I'll give in and I'll hit the snooze button. Or now that I'm not on my program that I've been doing the last year, and I'm sure you guys will ask some things about that too, but it's a lot easier to like eat the ice cream or, whatever it is that kind of in a way moves the needle backwards.
Sure. So speaking of your programs real quick, Josh, the ones you're referring to, I'm assuming, are the Live Hard and the 75 Hard challenge, correct? Was it 75 Hard first, then Live Hard?
Yeah. So you start with 75 Hard, which is 75 days and of a, pretty regimented, like self-discipline and mental toughness challenge. And then really it's not, they call it a challenge, it's really more of a program, right? Like something that you want to kind of adhere your life to. And then once you finish 75 Hard, you can, if you choose to, move on to Live Hard, which is an entire year of essentially this program.
And you introduced me to that program, I think at the same time. Did you start it? Was it back in March of last year? Was that the first time you attempted it?
Yeah, I think February, like late February is when I started. And yeah, that's when I introduced it to you. Basically, I heard the podcast talking about it and I said, I'm starting this. And I kind of reached out to you and said, hey, you want to do this with me?
Yeah, and I listened to the podcast, and at the same time, I heard it, I got inspired. I'm also I kind of view myself as somebody who's also pretty mentally tough, but dude, that challenge, it wore me down. I think I only got to day 45 and I just threw up my hands and I said, screw this. I got my results. I'm done. But it's just to walk people through if somebody has no idea what we're talking about. This is where you're doing 2 45-minute exercises every day. One of them has to be outside. You have to stick to a diet, no cheating at all. What else?
No alcohol. You got to drink a gallon of water, and then you have to read 10 pages of a self-help or entrepreneurial book. Like it can't be some kind of fantasy book or anything like that. No kids books, no picture books.
Yeah, relatively. I mean, ideally, it all sounds kind of simple, but to do it every day consistently, not miss one day. I remember I got to day 45, and I did my workout that morning. It was a Sunday or something like that, and I took my kids on a hike for my second workout, and it was too windy, and they wanted to go back. So we only got 5 minutes in, went back, and I'm like, okay, I'll work out when I get home. And it was already getting into the evening, and I can tell my wife was like, oh God, I'm cooking, dinner's going to be ready in 10 minutes, and I'm walking out the door. And it was at that moment I just decided, I'm not going to let this affect my marriage. Just for me, because really that challenge, it was just for me at that point. And that's what I felt like. And obviously I'm just giving excuses, but it is super hard to do this day in, day out for 75 days. That's a long time. But I got to commend you because you stuck with it. You stuck with it, and then you continued to do it for like almost a year now. So anyway, that's my little story on it. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that was that was one thing I kind of lucked out and learned early on. It was like part of the reason I wake up at 4 in the morning is because it's so much easier in a way to get all the things done that I need to get done early in the day before my family's even awake, right? So I'll typically wake up at 4 a.m. and the challenge changes if you're doing live hard. So I think it's phase 2 or phase 1. One of them, you have to take a 5-minute cold shower, um, which is difficult. So I just started waking up at 4 a.m. and the first thing I did was take a cold shower, get that out of the way, and then start drinking water. So you already kind of get a head start on that before you head to the gym. I'd read my 10 pages and then I'd go get my first workout in, and that's like a good portion of the things that you have to do, right? And then as long as I finished the rest of my water for the day, stuck to the diet, didn't drink any alcohol, and did another 45-minute workout sometime later in the day, then I was good to go. So knocking off those big chunks at the beginning was super helpful. But there was also days that I couldn't necessarily do that, right? So I think near the end of 75 hard, the first one, I was out in the field with the military as my last kind of hoorah before they essentially said don't come back in June. But so that wasn't necessarily a possibility. So you just had to find ways to get it done, which sucked. I remember one day, it was actually my birthday. It was on my birthday. I was in the middle of my 45-minute walk, my second workout for the day, and this officer pulls up and he's like, "Hey, come with me right now. You have to go run a range." And I'm like, "Fuck, I'm not going to get this done today." Luckily, I was on this range for I don't know, another 24 hours. I had to stay awake all night and run this range and help the guys get through shooting their Bradley fighting vehicles. But anyway, so during that, I would just like go outside kind of during the breaks and walk around the tower for 45 minutes. And it was raining and shitty, so that sucked. But for me at that point, it was like, I'm not going to fail this. And I kind of have a little bit of an ego thing too, because you can download the app and on Instagram, like you post your progress every day. And I'm like, I'm not going to be the guy that fails this and has to start over from day one. So there's a little bit of an ego thing in there that like forced me to go out and get it done. I did end up having to restart a couple times in later phases. But for the first 75 days, I was just determined not to fail, essentially, just to get it all done. And it was pretty difficult, but I think it was definitely worth it.
I think it was cool because I follow you on social media, Josh. It was cool watching your progress, but honestly, it was also cool watching you fail. And the reason for that is because you were accountable for it and you owned it, right? You owned it and you jumped right back on that horse. You started right again. I think it was the next day after your buddy's wedding or something like that. And you're like, I can't do this. And then I saw the next progress the next day, like back on day one. I'm like, he's doing it. He's gonna do it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the thing. Like excuse me, I think I failed 3 times during phase two. So I made it all the way through 75 hard. I made it through phase one without having to hit the reset button. And then during phase two, the first failure was like a stupid mistake because you're not like, if you're counting calories and counting macros, you can't eat junk food. So I consider Oreos junk food, even though it fit within my calories. So I had Oreos that day and I didn't think about it. I was just like, oh, this fits my calories or this fits my macros. So I'm fine. And I had the Oreos. And then I got to the end of the day and I'm like going over my food and I'm like, oh shit, I had Oreos. That's junk food. So I had to start over. Yeah. So, I made a post and was like, yeah, I screwed up, had cookies. So I'm starting over. So I started over. And I think at that point I was like 8 or 9 days in. Um, I think there was one other day I missed a workout. And so I started over. And then the other time I was the best man at one of my best friend Sean's weddings, and they're doing shots in the bottom. And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to not have a shot with all of my buddies and my best friend as his best man on his wedding. So I was just like, I'll just start again tomorrow and took the shot. But
so speaking of your cheat meals though, Josh. So once you're off the program, you're off it right now, correct?
yeah.
What is your favorite meal to have when you're not on this regimen?
Oh man. I'm a sucker for Chinese food. I really like Panda Express, and I also really like ice cream. So that's the other difficult thing because technically, like I'm still on Live Hard, right? But I just finished phase two, and you can take a break between phase two and phase three, but you're supposed to start phase three 30 days to the day that you started 75 hard the year before. So I can't start until like January. To do the last phase. So it's been pretty difficult, honestly, like knowing that I have 2 months and we got Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up. Um, I've been a little bit of a fatty lately, but this morning I was at the gym and I'm stronger now because I've been cutting weight this entire year. And I got to a point in my lifts where like I couldn't lift heavier than I was, and some of my lifts started going down because when you're on a calorie deficit after a while. So after eating a little more the last week or so, well, it's probably been 2 weeks by now, but I'm getting a little stronger. So I'm like, man, maybe I'll just forego the abs this winter and then during January start again cutting. But we'll see. It's kind of hard too mentally to go from that to eating like a cow. So
All right. I think we talked enough about 75 hard. You're doing awesome though. Let's get back at let's talk about real estate again. So we skipped a little bit. Let's go back and tell me when was the moment you decided to get into real estate, and what did day one look like, if you can remember, and kind of take us from there.
let's see. So, like I said, it was during COVID. It was kind of the height of COVID. I started watching a bunch of YouTube videos. I think it was in like April or May, and I actually got sent to Washington D.C. with the military to do the like George Floyd riot control stuff. And while I was there, I had a call with a mentorship program. Essentially, this guy out of Phoenix, Cody Sperber, the clever investor. So I was talking to one of their like enrollment people, and I basically had enough money saved up to join this program. I think I had like $10,000, and that was just about the most amount of money I've had ever in my life to that point, just like all in one chunk. So during that, I think it was like, man, when was it? Late May, early June. I just said, you know what, I'm going for it. I'm going to do it. So I enrolled in that program and started learning how to wholesale and do all that stuff. So day one was really just me like going deep into that. And, you know, I think I had no idea what I was doing. I think I went and set up an LLC, and I got like a mailbox, like a business mailbox and all that stuff set up. And then I had to start marketing. So I just went on Zillow, and I was like looking for FISBOs, and I just started calling FISBOs and just like calling people. And I think I bought a texting platform and started texting people looking for a deal. So that was pretty much day one, just calling random people asking if they wanted to sell me their house.
All right, cool. So pretty much day one, you joined a mentorship program. Is that right?
Yeah, and I just started like right then and there.
Do you remember what you got out of that joining that program? How much it was, and if you felt like you got your money's worth?
Yeah, I think total it was just over $7,000. So I had a little bit left over after that to like, you know, start the LLC and do all those things, get a texting platform. But I think it was definitely worth it. Like the only thing I knew about wholesaling and real estate or any of that was just from YouTube. And I knew that YouTube wasn't going to be enough to, you know, not, uh, I guess, screw me in a sense. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm an action taker, so I knew I was just going to go out there and do it. But I also wanted to be careful because, you know, a home is like the biggest investment most people make in their lives. So for people who don't do this full time, like we do, like that's probably the biggest thing that they're ever going to buy and the most important thing to them. It's a lot of money. So when you're dealing with people's lives and livelihoods, like I really, really wanted to be careful with wholesaling because I didn't want to hurt somebody by mistake, right? And that was actually probably my biggest fear getting into real estate was like, okay, if I get somebody under contract, but I can't figure out what to do with this house, like I did not want to have to back out on somebody. I wanted to make sure like if I was going to lock up their property, like I was going to get it done. Um, so yeah, the mentorship, the program was really, really helpful because it just kind of laid out everything step by step of what I needed to do and how I kind of needed to do it. And then I just, you know, went from there, figuring it out.
Perfect. So that mentorship was worth it to you because you actually took action and did what they told you to do.
Yeah. And I still have access to that learning portal and everything. I don't even think I got through like half the material. So honestly, I could probably still go back, and I should probably still go back and learn some new things because I'm sure there's plenty that I missed that I could implement now to much greater effect.
So when I met you, was that around the same time when you showed up to the networking event that we had here locally in North Idaho?
Yeah, yeah. So I showed up to the REI meetings that our team puts on. I think right after I had just done my first deal, or it was around the time that I just did my first or second deal. So I decided to show up there to look for some cash buyers, look for some other people and network, and that's where we met.
What made you want to go to a networking event, or how'd you hear about it?
I think I was just kind of exploring my options. And I knew that if I was going to continue to do deals and do them well, I just needed to get around more people. I also didn't have like a massive cash buyers list. I barely knew that many cash buyers in the first place. Um, so I think that was kind of one of the things that prompted me to do it. I was like, okay, there's going to be cash buyers at this REI meeting. So when I do get these deals under contract, more than likely one of them is going to want to buy one of my deals. So that's what prompted me to go. And then I found it, I think, either on Facebook, but I signed up on meetup.com. So I was just looking, and in that mentorship program that I took, that was one of the things that the mentor told me to do. He was like, hey, go look up all your local REIA meetings and start going to REIA meetings if you want to find cash buyers and things like that. So, yeah.
That's some good advice. Show up to the networking meetings.
Yep.
So, do you want to talk about this mentorship a little bit? Like, who's the mentorship for, or who's it through?
Yeah, it's Cody Sperber, Clever Investor. They're in Phoenix. I think they do most of the stuff online. Nick and I actually went to one of their conferences this April in Vegas, Clever Summit, which was pretty good. We got to hear Robert Kiyosaki speak and a couple other people, but that was kind of the first one. And then I've joined a few since then. I'm a SubTo student under Pace Morby SubTo program. And I'm just constantly like, I'm trying to find more stuff because I just like to learn. And everything that I've done so far as like mentorship programs and just courses or whatever, I've implemented in some way or another, and they've helped.
Awesome.
I think since I've known you, so you've been in that Clever Investor mentorship program. You joined Pace Morby's mentorship program. I think there was a local investor here in the area that you were in his mentorship program. And then you also joined our team, which is kind of like a mentorship in the real estate agent / investor world. Can you tell us a little bit about what each one of those offered you and what you got out of it?
Yeah. So with the first one I joined, the Clever Investor, that was kind of like a crash course in wholesaling and flipping, right? So it was like big picture stuff, like this is what wholesaling is, this is what you need to know, this is how you need to do it. Like this is how to market, this is how to do all of those things, this is what you do when you get a deal under contract. So that was kind of the big picture side of it, but I was still kind of missing like the local market like knowledge. Like I didn't know anything really about our local market. I just knew that I've lived here forever and like I should probably know what's going on here. So I joined up with a local real estate investor, and sat down with him and just started asking him questions like, hey, what should I do here? Da 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 da. Well, I found out that he kind of runs his own kind of, I guess, education. He takes on students essentially that he partners with, and they do deals together. So he offered to bring me on, but I just spent all my money on the previous program, so I didn't have the funds to be able to pay for it, but I had time. So I approached him instead and said, hey, look, I just paid for this other program. I have an idea of what to do now, but I don't have the money to join your program. What if I just, go out there and, market for you and lock up deals, and then we can do these deals together. So he agreed to that and started paying for some of my marketing costs. And then from that point on, I just started finding deals. My first deal was a for sale by owner that I called, and we wholesaled that one. And I made a whopping $250. But for me, that was like the proof of concept I needed to like be like, okay, I know this works. I just got to find a better deal, because it really wasn't the greatest deal. Funny enough, that deal we ended up, I think, selling to his father-in-law, and then his father-in-law didn't have enough time to do it. So I ended up representing that as an agent on the market like the next year and selling it and making some good money on the commissions. But anyway, so just having the local knowledge was really helpful with him, and getting to network with some of his people. He really walked me through my first couple of flips. So that was super helpful there, because I did one wholesale deal and then was like, well, I'm just going to start buying these as flips. What's the point of wholesaling them if I could just flip them? So.
And if I could just make a comment on that, I know you mentioned you only made $250 on your first deal, but I just want to throw this out there. I mean, it's better than losing money on your first deal, and you got your hand held. So, I mean, you got an education and you got to make a little bit of money. Wasn't much, but you got to get through the first deal without losing money. And I'm assuming you learned a lot, right?
Yeah. Oh, I learned a ton. So that was kind of my first like eye opener into doing deals. And then basically the second deal came along and we just decided to hold on to it and flip it. Next deal came, we flipped that one. And then I did a couple other wholesales after that, just because I started networking with you guys and I knew you more. And then through SubTo, joining that mentorship, obviously I was able to put that tool in my tool belt. We have already gotten a few creative deals. I got got a deal last year, SubTo, that I actually wholesaled to Nick, and then he flipped it, and I got to represent him on the yeah, the transaction as an agent there. And now we're under contract with another seller finance deal that we're going to flip here in the next, I don't know, hopefully a month or so when that closes.
Cool. So speaking of SubTo real quick and seller financing, can you explain what both those are and the difference between them?
Yeah, so SubTo is short for subject to. So you're buying a property subject to the mortgage. Um, Essentially, just layman's terms, the mortgage is staying in the seller's name, and you're taking over the payments on it. And then you're going to do whatever you want with the house as far as an exit strategy. So you can buy and hold on to it as rental, flip it, whatever kind of works, right? Seller finance is when the property's already paid off. They don't owe anything. It's free and clear, and the seller is financing it to you. So they're holding a note. So, let's say I'm buying the house for $200,000. Maybe I put a little bit of money in the seller's pocket, and then they hold a note for the remainder that I just pay off every month, as if they were the bank.
Cool.
And if I could just add too, yeah, and also with seller financing, they don't always have to own it free and clear. They could like wrap the mortgage, and that's also considered seller financing. But we can get into that on another podcast. Okay, so you got into that third mentorship program, and then tell us a little bit about joining the real estate team and what that's been like.
Yeah, so like I said, I showed up to the REI meetings shortly after, I think, my first deal, or right around the time I got that deal, and started talking to Nick and Joe, who both run the team. And pretty quickly after talking to them, they approached me and were like, "Hey, have you ever thought about getting your real estate license and becoming an agent?" And I basically said, "No, screw you. I just want to wholesale." And
you did say that. You said, "Screw you and your mother, and I won't have any part of it."
Yeah, I was like, "No, I don't want to be an agent. That sounds horrible."
And then what did it take, like a day or two, and you call back, you're like, "Actually, this might be great."
No, it was probably like a week and a half or so. I thought about it for a little while, and I'm like, you know what? I'm already essentially doing the same exact thing. I'm just marketing to sellers and trying to like get their houses. Being an agent and having my license is probably a good idea, just to have another tool in the tool belt. Like worst case scenario, I can list the house or whatever. And it has been extremely beneficial, like even just listing my own flips and saving some money there on the commissions. And just being able to use that creatively to my advantage. But yeah, so probably about a week and a half, I thought about it and I called Joe back and was like, you know what? Yeah, let's meet up. I think I might actually get my license and see what that looks like. And yeah, shortly thereafter, got licensed. It took a while to get licensed, actually. I think it took me like 4 or 5 months. Because it just took me so long to get through the education and everything. I was still working at the insurance job for another couple months before I lost that job. In between, I was still doing the National Guard thing. So I think finally got my license in December of 2020 and then joined the team that month.
Was there anything about, any preconceived notions that you had about being an agent, and then when you actually became an agent, is there anything that you realized that that was a little bit different about this industry than what you had imagined?
Yeah, I think so. My initial hesitance to get my license was just because as a wholesaler, like I didn't want to have to disclose what I was doing, which sounds a little slimy. And now knowing what being an agent's all about, like it's kind of silly not to get your license. I think that's kind of the trend we're going in the United States anyway. There's a bunch of states now that are saying you can't wholesale unless you have a real estate license. So I think for the future, it's going to be a good idea anyway. But disclosing is just a better way to be in business, right? Like to transact real estate, like just telling them what you're all about. But that hesitance was only for a couple weeks, and I just decided to get the license. But besides that, like I don't know. I've learned a lot as an agent. I still don't know if I necessarily want to be an agent like forever. But you know, it's been super helpful, and I will definitely always have my license active and current for sure.
Yeah, because one of the biggest difference that I can see anyway, when you're marketing to sellers and stuff, you have your logo with the little Keller Williams Realty thing, and that's about it, right?
Yeah, and you can say I'm a licensed professional.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's discouraging, but time will tell.
Plus, the tax advantages are incredible as a qualified real estate professional, which agents are. So,
That's very true. All right, cool.
So, Josh, what is your favorite method for acquiring deals? You've done a lot of wholesaling, subject to creative financing, buy and hold stuff. Like, what has been the thing that you want to keep doing that's going to drive you forward, do you think?
oh man, seller finance has so far been like probably one of the easiest and seems to be one of the most lucrative things I've done as far as acquiring a deal. Cash is always going to be a thing. Obviously, that's kind of the one thing that most people respond to, because you don't go out there and market and say like, "Hey, let me take over your mortgage." Like that just doesn't happen. You market cash first, and then when you realize that's not going to fit their situation, you have these tools and these things that you can use creatively to go another route and still help the person out and still get a good deal. But so far, the seller finance deal that we're in the middle of is on paper looked incredible. We'll see what happens at the end. Then again, we're doing a deal right now. Hopefully closing Wednesday. That was a cash deal. That was like just a slam dunk. One of the easiest deals I've ever done too. So I really like both, but I guess we'll kind of see. Come back to me in a month or so.
All right. So just to expand on that a little bit, what has been the worst real estate deal you've ever done? What has given you the most headaches? If you can think back, you've done what 10 or 15 deals now in the last couple of years.
Oh yeah, I think just this last month I've been in 9 deals actively, working on 9 deals at a time. Just this last month, and so that's been between mostly flips, new construction, and the creative deals. So new construction definitely has been the biggest headache. Yeah, and obviously Nick can speak to this because we're partnered on all 4 of those deals, and it's just been very, very difficult. My biggest mistake with that was definitely like underestimating it for sure. Kind of going in as a newbie and not really knowing anything, right, and just kind of looking at it as more of like, oh, it's like a flip with extra steps, but it's really not. And there's so many different factors and things that go into it. I think the biggest perspective change or perspective shift was like it just takes so much longer to do things than you expect. And we would have been fine, but just with the way things have gone this last couple of years, like 2021, things were great, but all of our prices on materials and labor and everything just went up so high that it really caught us, it put us in a bad spot there. And then, you know, as soon as we're ready to sell these things, the market takes a dip and starts going down. So yeah, it just caught us in a really bad spot. Unfortunately, it was a timing thing. Like if we could have figured out how to do things much faster, that would have been the saving grace, I think. And I think that's the biggest thing with new construction, especially if you're doing spec homes. Like builders are one thing, they have like a huge system set up, but when you're just doing 1 or 2 here and there as a spec builder, like time is of the essence, and you have to get these things done really fast, which is hard to do because you have to manage so many people. And most of my involvement was like bringing the partnership that found the deal, and then like trying to do the designing the homes with, you know, CAD program and all that stuff, and then, you know, doing things here and there on the management side of those deals. But yeah, the worst deals for sure. And they're very difficult. Don't do new construction, and don't do especially if you don't know what you're doing.
So, so you mentioned earlier in the podcast, just trying to figure out what tasks are important to do on a day-to-day basis. What would you say now that you have a couple years experience being self-employed? What are your most time efficient tasks, or what's your 80/20 when it comes to tasks?
Yeah, you have to lead gen. You have to lead gen every single day, and that's hard to do. That's where the discipline really comes into place, because like it's just like working out, right? Like there's a lot of times when I really don't want to, even though I know I have to. So yeah, doing the lead gen every day. You need to be having conversations with people, one way or another, whether it's in the initial conversation, you just met them today and you're trying to see if they're interested in selling a home, or if it's in the follow-up, you've kind of got some interest and you're just kind of nurturing that over time. Those are the biggest things, though, just talking to people. I think that's really it. Like that's the whole 20%. And then appointments, you need to convert those into appointments. And then you convert the appointments into contracts, whether they're a wholesale deal or a listing or whatever. Yeah.
Nice. All right. I think we're getting close to winding down on the episode. We're at like 53 minutes right now, but we got some more questions for you, Josh. So 5-year plan. Where do you think you're going to be in 5 years? Are you going to be doing the same thing you're doing now, or are you going to be elevated to a different level, you think?
Well, I'm hoping that I'm on a much higher level for sure. I'm definitely going to be doing the same thing as in this industry, real estate, doing investment deals. I don't have any plans of doing anything otherwise, like anything different. But yeah, the goal is to be at a much higher level. That seems to change all the time because kind of, like I said earlier, have the shiny object syndrome a little bit, but it will definitely be within real estate. My goal is to grow. So first off, I really want to grow this team, right? With Nick and Joe. Nick and I have talked somewhat, very briefly, about expanding the team, so that might be something in our future. And I really want to dial in the investing side of the business, whether that's like an add-on business to the REI team, right, that I just kind of run myself with wholesaling, something, right? Like I want to have a business running efficiently in the next 5 years, as we're growing the REI team and potentially expanding to other places. And I've done this virtually too, so I don't necessarily have to be here, or necessarily have to have the business here. Like I think I can grow it in another state just fine, while I live here and play here and do all the things. So
Yeah, because you are from Phoenix, and I know I every time you talk about Phoenix, your face just lights up. And I know a lot of your hero investors are down there, and that's definitely been something that you've really considered, right? Maybe possibly moving to Phoenix and just continuing what you're doing now there, which would make a lot of sense because from what I know of you, it seems like you're very, very skilled in being disciplined, showing up on the phone, and converting sellers. Converting sellers to appointments and then getting good deals under contract. And you can do that anywhere, just like you've said before. So I think that's I'm proud of you in that fact that you've kind of built yourself up to where you can take this where you need it to go, wherever you are. You don't have to be stuck here to this market, because it's not like North Idaho is all you know. What you know is how to talk to sellers, how to get good deals under contract. And I think that's fantastic that, if you wanted to move back to Phoenix someday, you absolutely could, and you'll probably kill it.
yeah, and I think that it's definitely not something I think I want to do in the next couple years even, but Um, I would definitely keep that open for the future. I think the biggest thing would just be getting my wife on board, right? I think she definitely wants to move somewhere warm, but I don't know if she's necessarily sold on Phoenix. And then I just know from a competition standpoint, Phoenix is like a pretty competitive market, probably the most competitive in the United States. So whether I'm ready for that or not is yet to be seen. But yeah, the fundamentals never change. The fundamentals don't change anywhere you go. Um, I think it's just going to be about volume in those competitive markets, right? But then again, here is like we live in kind of a really weird market where it's very, very competitive, but there's not a whole lot of inventory. So who knows? We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I would argue that it's possible Coeur d'Alene real estate agents might be the most competitive in the country just per capita, because there's about 3,000 agents. Of course, only 10% of them or so are very active, but you got all those people basically competing for the 7 listings in Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah. That's probably one of the biggest things I run into on the phone is like, oh, well, I already have a friend, or my daughter's friend is an agent. She's going to list our house. Or because I call a lot of expired listings and for sale by owner. Oh, well, my son's an agent. So I do run into that a lot, but it's not necessarily like super hard to get past that objection. Um, but it's for sure competitive. And, especially on the agent side, that mind share aspect, like being the guy or girl they think of first, that's probably the biggest competition right there. So
Awesome. Well, hey, like I said, we got some final questions for you, Josh. First one, what's the most influential book on mindset or business that you've read that you'd recommend to other people?
I'd say Atomic Habits by James Clear has probably been the most influential for me. Just figuring out how to structure my habits around my goals and things like that. Like I'm still definitely working on those things, but yeah, I think that book has been probably the most influential, just on the like going from a W-2 to self-employed, like having to figure it out, because everybody kind of knows, like what to do. You don't really have to be told most of the time. Like most people know what to do. It's just figuring out the steps to get there and building the habits to do those things. So yeah, I'd say Atomic Habits for sure.
Nice. And so, say if you have another question, if you have $30 million that's gifted to you in your bank account, what is the first thing you're going to spend it on?
Oh, dude, I am going to invest that immediately. I'm probably going to go find a cash flowing apartment, right? Um, but if I have 30 million, man, I could buy a lot of cash flowing apartments. I'm sure pretty quickly. So that's what I would do. I'd go put it into a bunch of really big buildings and turn that money into more money.
It's always interesting to see if people are going to buy liabilities or assets with that money if they were gifted to it. I thought you'd buy an ice cream company, to be honest with you.
I mean, I'm sure I would probably take some nice vacations too. And like, yeah, with the shiny object syndrome, I'd probably look at that money and be like, well, I do want to buy a couple things over here, see how those pan out. But I think first priority would be securing that capital and some cash flowing assets. And then, maybe I'll blow the rest, but we'll see.
There you go. So, what's been the biggest motivator for you, or what's your reason for success, and what's your why?
Oh, that's a hard question. The why question has always stumped me because I'm sure, like most people, you're like, what the hell is my why? Um, Saying like my wife and kids kind of feels like a cop out because, like, who doesn't want to take care of their wife and kids and their family? Um, Hopefully, this doesn't sound arrogant, but I don't know, man. I've always had this like feeling deep inside that I'm supposed to be like somebody great. You know what I mean? Um, I don't know what that is or what that really looks like in the end. I'm also a Christian, right? Like I follow God, I follow Jesus, and from my belief system, like we were created in His image, right? We were created to be like amazing and incredible. So I think deep down my why is just like, I want to see how far I can go, and I want to see how big I can take whatever it is I'm doing, like whether it's in business or like lifting or whatever, right? I want to see how, like, can I be the best, or can I be close to the best? Like, how far can I get? I think that's really my why deep down. Like, I feel like I should be much further than I am. And those are usually the things that push me and keep me up at night, when, especially when I'm in that phase of life where I'm not necessarily being too disciplined at the moment or whatever, right? Those are the things that always push me back. Like, I think, man, I'm losing right now. And I just feel like I should be further along. So I don't know. I just want to take it as big as possible. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'll get hit by a bus before then. Who knows?
I don't think you're being arrogant at all with that. Because, I mean, if you ever read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, what they found was that everybody's, one of their biggest desires is the feeling of importance. And I think you're just being honest about it. And a lot of people, they're not going to be. But I think with most people, it's just a basic instinct of theirs to live some sort of way where they're not going to be forgotten about, build up some sort of legacy that they can hand down one day, either, or, just not be forgotten about when they're dead. But I think you're just being honest about it. And most people, like you said, they just cop out and they say, oh, I'm doing this for my family. No, you're not. You can go do whatever and make a good income for your family. Like, you can stop at a certain point. What your family needs is they just need you to be there for them. Your kids just want you to play with them. But I just think, I just commend you for being honest about it. You just want to be the best person that you can be. And you're not afraid to tell people.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I consider myself a very like normal, average person pretty much my whole life, right? So I never really had any like insane talents or anything like that I could like really hold on to that would naturally take me someplace, right? I've most of my life had no freaking idea what I wanted to do. So now being in business and being in real estate and like really having attached myself to that, because I really love the real estate industry, and I love doing this. I feel like, I'm very glad that I found it, right? Now it's like, how far can I take it? How big can I make it, right? And not really necessarily having a natural talent or ability. It's like, how do you measure that? Well, typically it's in dollars, right? So I try to tell everybody that I'm going to be a billionaire one day. So hopefully I make it there. But who knows? I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. Yeah, we'll see.
That's true. So I just got I got two more questions for you real quick. The first one is, do we have a deal closing this week?
We do.
We do? Okay. I wasn't sure if that was closing. We're all very excited about that.
That's the one thing in real estate, boys and girls listening, is the other thing I've learned the last couple of years is like, everybody tells you, oh, you're going to make money in 30 days. Most of the time that never happens. Like, I don't think I've ever closed a deal on time necessarily. Like, I'm sure I have, but those aren't the ones that you remember, you think about. It's like most of them, I'm like, something happens and they get extended like a month or 2 months, and you're like, God, I have no other money coming in. Please close my deal. So yeah.
But this should be a good paycheck this week, right? One of your biggest, right?
Yeah, $38,000 after everything's said and done. Should be.
That's a good week.
That is a good week. I'll take it.
Y'all did pretty good on that deal. I'm happy to be a part of it. I do got one more question though, Josh. What's your push-up record? How many can you do?
Oh man, I don't think I've tested myself in push-ups lately. When I was in the military, so before they changed the PT test in the last couple of years, the old PT test was how many push-ups you can do in 2 minutes. And most people would get to failure well before the 2 minutes. I think my best was like 78 push-ups in 2 minutes. And that was like the last push-up I was like struggling to get up. But I'm a lot stronger and a lot bigger than I was back then. So who knows? Might be might be a lot better now.
Nice. All right. Well, guys, this has been awesome today. Nick, do you have any closing thoughts you want to add or suggest?
No, man, I appreciate you being here, and thanks for doing what you do. I've been really impressed by you the last couple of months. Just, you keep showing up, you keep making appointments, you just keep grinding, even though you've had a lot of bad luck this year, and I know we didn't really expand on that, but it doesn't really seem to keep you down, and if it does, you don't show it. So I'm proud of you. Stick with it.
Just bottle it up deep inside. That's all you got to do.
For those listening, there's better ways to process that, but
no, there's not, Jeremy. Shut your mouth.
Okay, what do I know?
Just kidding.
Hey, I really appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you.
Yeah, Josh, thanks so much. It's been awesome, and we'll probably have you on again sometime in the future. We'll talk about more of your projects going on and all the successes and trials and tribulations on the way. So thanks again, guys. We appreciate it.
Hey, by the way, quick shameless plug. Anybody out there listening who wants to get a hold of me, my phone number is 208-818-2804. I can help you out in a bunch of different ways when it comes to investing and being your agent or whatever you need help with. So reach out to me. I'm on social media, Josh Cote, C-O-T-E, and thanks again.
We'll put your number and your social media channels in the show notes and everything as well. So
Yes, we will.
Yeah. Good stuff.
All right. Thanks, Josh. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys. You too.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to the Investor Shed podcast. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel for instant access to all future episodes. If you or someone you know has investing experience or stories to share, reach out to us in the comments or via email.